When I was a kid, people didn't bully me. When I was growing up, I wasn't the kid everyone made fun of. I wasn't bullied in the way you see in movies. What happened to me was quieter than that. People simply forgot I was there. In class, teachers sometimes skipped my name during attendance. Not on purpose, just because I never spoke loud enough for them to remember me. At lunch, I sat at the end of the table. I listened to conversations I was never part of. I laughed at jokes that weren't meant for me. I became really good at being invisible. At home, life was calm but distant. My parents worked long hours. They were good people, just tired people. When they came home, they wanted silence, and I learned to give them that. So I stayed in my room. I stayed quiet. I stayed out of the way. But inside my head, everything was loud. I had dreams I didn't know how to explain. Not dreams about being famous, not dreams about being rich. I just wanted my life to matter. Every night I opened an old notebook I kept under my bed. I didn't write homework in it. I didn't write stories either. I wrote ideas. Ideas about helping people. Ideas about creating something that could change lives. Ideas about proving that even quiet kids could do loud things in the world. For a long time, those ideas were only mine. Until one day, in middle school, I decided to tell someone. We were sitting on the steps outside the school building. The bell had just rung and everyone was rushing home. I stayed behind with a boy from my class. He wasn't my friend, but he wasn't my enemy either. He was just there. And for some reason, I felt brave that day. I told him, one day I want to do something important. I don't know what yet, but I want my life to mean something. He looked at me like I had just told a joke. Then he laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, just enough to hurt. You? He said. You barely talk in class. How are you going to do anything big? I laughed too. Pretended it didn't matter. But that night, when I went home, I tore a page out of my notebook. Not because I stopped dreaming, but because I stopped sharing my dreams. From that day on, I kept everything inside. Years passed. Middle school turned into high school. My classmates grew louder. I grew quieter. But something inside me changed. I stopped waiting to be noticed, and I started preparing. While other kids hung out after school, I went home and learned. I watched videos about people who started with nothing. I read about inventors, creators, leaders, people who were ignored once and remembered later. I practiced skills nobody around me cared about. Sometimes I didn't even know why I was learning them. I just felt that one day I would need them. Most nights I stayed up later than I should have. Not because I was playing games, not because I was texting friends, but because I was building a future in my head. There were nights when I felt stupid. Nights when I asked myself, why am I even trying? No one believed in me. No one asked about my goals. No one expected anything from me. And sometimes that hurt more than being hated. One night, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked tired. I looked small. I looked invisible. And I asked out loud, will anyone ever see me? The room stayed quiet. But then I said something else. Something I had never said before. Even if no one ever sees me, I will. From that moment on, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would keep going, even when nobody clapped, even when nobody noticed, even when nobody cared. Because one day, I wanted to prove that the quietest person in the room could have the loudest impact on the world. And I had no idea yet. But that promise was about to change everything.
After I made that promise to myself, nothing magical happened. The world didn't suddenly change. People didn't start noticing me. School didn't become easier. But something inside me shifted. I stopped seeing myself as the quiet kid who was waiting to be chosen. And I started seeing myself as someone who was building something in silence. Every day after school, I followed the same routine. I went straight home. I closed my door and I worked. Some days I felt focused and motivated. Other days I stared at my notebook for hours and felt completely lost. There were moments when I didn't understand what I was doing or why it even mattered. Moments when I felt like I was walking forward without seeing the road ahead. Late at night, doubts always came. They sounded like familiar voices. What if you're wasting your time? What if you're not talented enough? What if the people who ignored you were right? Those thoughts didn't come once. They came every night. And the hardest part was this: I had no proof that I was doing the right thing. No results, no praise, no signs, just effort. High school made everything heavier. Everyone around me seemed confident. They talked about parties, friends, plans for the future. I listened quietly and wondered if something was wrong with me. Sometimes I felt like life was happening everywhere, except where I was standing. There was one class that terrified me more than the others: public speaking. One day, our teacher announced that we would have to present a project in front of the entire class. I felt my stomach drop. I had spent years avoiding attention, avoiding eyes on me, avoiding moments where my voice mattered. The night before the presentation, I barely slept. I practiced quietly in my room, repeating the same lines over and over. My hands were shaking even though no one was watching. The next day, when my name was called, my legs felt weak. I stood in front of the class and looked out at familiar faces. Some bored, some distracted, some already whispering. I opened my mouth and my voice cracked. Someone laughed softly. For a moment, everything inside me told me to stop, to sit down, to disappear again. But then I remembered something. I remembered the boy who stood alone on the playground, the boy who wrote ideas in a notebook no one cared about, the boy who promised himself he would not disappear. So I kept talking. My voice was quiet. My presentation wasn't perfect, but I finished. When I sat down, there was silence. No applause, no compliments, but inside me, something important had happened. I didn't run away. Outside of school, my life stayed simple. My parents were still busy. We didn't have deep conversations about dreams or success. But one evening, my father stopped in front of my room. He saw the books, the notes, the late nights. He asked, "What are you doing all this for?" I didn't know how to explain it. So I said the only honest thing I could: I don't want to be invisible forever. He didn't respond right away. Then he nodded and said, "Just don't quit." That was it. No motivation speech, no advice. But those words stayed with me longer than he ever knew. As months passed, people started noticing small things. They noticed that I stayed after class, that I didn't waste time, that I was always working on something. Some asked questions. What are you trying to become? Why do you work so hard? I never answered clearly, because saying my dream out loud still scared me. What if I said it and failed? Then came the moment that almost ended everything. I failed at something important, something I had worked toward for months. When I saw the result, my chest felt heavy. All the old doubts rushed back at once. You tried, and you still failed. Nothing has changed. That night, I didn't open my notebook. I turned off the light and sat in the dark. For the first time in a long time, I thought about quitting, about choosing an easier path, about accepting that maybe some people are meant to stay invisible. But then I asked myself one question. If I quit now, what will my life look like in 5 years? The answer scared me more than failure. So the next morning, I opened my notebook again. Not because I felt confident, not because I felt strong, but because I refused to disappear. That was the moment I truly understood something important. Confidence doesn't come before action. It comes after it. You don't wake up believing in yourself. You build belief slowly, by not giving up. I wasn't successful yet. I wasn't recognized yet. But I was no longer waiting for permission to exist. I was becoming someone who was ready. And I didn't know it then. But everything I was building in silence was about to be seen. I didn't tell anyone about that failure. Not my parents, not my classmates, not even myself, really. I just kept moving. Every morning, I woke up early. Not because I had to, but because staying in bed felt more dangerous than getting up. I realized something slowly. Quitting isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It looks like procrastination, like I'll do it tomorrow, like convincing yourself that rest is the same as stopping. So I built small rules for myself. I didn't promise big success. I didn't promise results. I only promised one thing. I would show up, even if it was for 30 minutes, even if I felt tired, even if I felt stupid. Some days, that was all I could give. And strangely, that was enough to keep going. Weeks turned into months. I didn't become popular. I didn't suddenly fit in. But people started reacting differently. Teachers noticed that I stayed after class, that I asked better questions, that I didn't rush out when the bell rang. One day, a teacher stopped me in the hallway. "You've changed," she said. I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't changed on the outside. I still walked alone, still ate lunch quietly. But inside, something was solid now. I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was trying to be ready. Then something unexpected happened. I was given a small opportunity. Nothing impressive, nothing exciting, just a chance to help with something important. Old me would have said no. Old me would have thought, I'm not ready. But this time, I said yes before fear could speak. I failed again at first. I made mistakes. I felt exposed. But I didn't disappear. I asked questions. I fixed what I broke. I stayed. And slowly, people stopped correcting me and started trusting me. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in a window. I looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. I wasn't counting how many people noticed me. I was building proof. Proof that I could keep going. Proof that fear didn't control me. Proof that I could survive failure without running. There was a moment I'll never forget. I was sitting alone late at night, working again. And for the first time, the doubts were quiet, not gone, just quieter. They didn't ask, what if you fail? They asked something else. What if you don't? That question scared me even more because success meant responsibility. It meant being seen. It meant stepping out of the shadows I had lived in for so long. I realized something important that night. Sometimes we hide not because we're weak, but because we're afraid of who we might become. I don't know how this story ends yet. I'm not standing on a stage. I'm not famous. I'm not finished. But I'm no longer invisible because I stopped treating myself that way. And the world has a strange habit of following your lead. I didn't notice the change right away. That's the strange thing about growth. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock on the door. It just shows up quietly and waits to see if you're ready. One day, someone asked for my opinion. It was a small thing, a casual question, but it stopped me because no one had ever asked me that before. Not in class, not in group work, not in life. For a second, I almost gave the answer I used to give. I don't know. Whatever you think, the safe answers. But this time, I didn't. I said what I really thought. My voice was calm, not loud, not confident, just honest. The room didn't react right away. No laughter, no judgment, just listening. And something clicked in my head. This is what being seen actually feels like. After that, small moments started stacking up. A teacher asked me to stay after class, not because I was in trouble, but because she trusted me. Someone sat next to me instead of across the room. Someone remembered my name without being reminded. They were tiny things, but to someone who had lived unnoticed for years, they were massive. The strangest part? I hadn't changed my personality. I didn't become louder. I didn't become cooler. I just stopped hiding, stopped shrinking my thoughts, stopped apologizing for existing, and the world adjusted. There was a moment that scared me more than failure ever did. Opportunity. A real one. Not big, not public, but real. It meant responsibility. It meant expectations. It meant that if I failed now, someone else would see it. That night, fear came back stronger than ever. Not the fear of being invisible, the fear of being exposed. What if they realize you don't belong here? What if this was a mistake? What if this is as far as you go? I sat in the dark and thought about walking away, about choosing safety again, about going back to being invisible. But then I realized something important. Invisibility had never protected me. It only delayed my life. So I said yes. I worked harder than I ever had. Not because I wanted approval, but because I didn't want to betray myself. I made mistakes. I learned in public. I felt uncomfortable almost every day, but I stayed. And slowly, something unbelievable happened. People stopped watching me closely. They trusted me. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation. Someone mentioned my name, and then they said something I'll never forget. He's reliable. That word hit harder than any compliment. Reliable. Not talented. Not special. Just someone who shows up. For the first time, I understood this. Success doesn't belong to the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the one who stays. I went home that day and sat in my room. Same desk, same walls, but it felt different because I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was living inside the process. But here's the truth no one tells you. When life finally starts moving forward, it tests you one last time. And I didn't see it coming. I used to believe that one day, everything would suddenly make sense. That there would be a moment when someone would notice me, when a door would open, when life would finally say, "This is your turn." I waited for that moment for a long time, but it never came. And for a while, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. The truth is, life doesn't announce change. There's no countdown, no spotlight, no music in the background. The moment everything truly changed for me was quiet. No applause, no dramatic scene, no one watching. Just me, sitting alone, realizing something I had avoided for years. I was tired. Not physically, emotionally. Tired of chasing approval. Tired of proving my worth to people who never asked to understand me. Tired of waiting for permission to exist. That night, I understood something simple. No one was coming to choose me. And strangely, that was freeing. I stopped asking myself, do they like me? Do they see me? Do I matter to them? And I started asking a different question. Can I respect the life I'm building? That question changed everything. For the first time, my effort wasn't about recognition. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about alignment, about waking up and knowing that even if nobody noticed me, I was still moving in the right direction. Looking back now, I understand why being invisible hurt so much. It wasn't because people didn't see me. It was because I didn't see myself as worthy yet. I outsourced my value. I waited for it to be confirmed by others. And when it wasn't, I assumed it didn't exist. I was wrong. I thought confidence came first. That belief came first. That success came first. But confidence didn't arrive before action. It arrived after hundreds of quiet decisions. Belief didn't appear when things worked. It grew when things didn't. And success. Success was never a moment. It was a direction. Slowly, things began to shift. Not in a movie-like way. Not overnight. But people noticed consistency. They noticed that I showed up. That I stayed. That I didn't disappear anymore. Some started asking questions. Some treated me differently. Some stayed silent. And for the first time, that silence didn't scare me. Because I no longer needed everyone. There's still a version of me that exists. The quiet kid, the one who sat alone, the one who believed disappearing would hurt less than trying. I don't hate him. I don't judge him. I'm grateful for him because he taught me how to survive discomfort, how to sit with loneliness, how to keep going without applause. He taught me endurance. He taught me discipline. He taught me how to stand alone without breaking. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't become visible by being louder. You don't become important by being chosen. You don't become worthy by being approved. You become visible the moment you stop quitting on yourself, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. I don't know where this journey will take me next. I don't have all the answers. I don't have everything figured out. But I know this: I will never disappear again. Not because the world sees me now, but because I finally do. This story ends here. But the journey doesn't.